Hello, everybody. We are live. I am BigCatKayla, and I am here joined with our wonderful guest today, No White Guilt. Hello, No White Guilt. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely, Kayla. I'm really happy to be here with you. I'm excited that you invited me on your show. I've heard a little bit of several of your shows, and I really have enjoyed the conversational nature. And you have been uh, in the calls for white well-being on my channel in the comments, in the questions for quite a little while now. And I have enjoyed your presence. I respect your dedication to the cause and our people. I am, as she said, as Kayla said, online, No White Guilt. You may call me Jason,
Okay, I
Kayla.
wanted to make sure about that before I said anything.
Okay. And I have many platforms, and they're growing all the time. So I will just direct people to my website, which is nowhiteguilt.org.
And all of the links associated to Jason and his channels, YouTube, Twitter, his website, pardon me, they are all in the description. And I wasn't able to get the link for your book, but I know if people go to your website, they'll be able to find it. Jason is the author of Go Free, A Guide to Aligning with the Archetype of Western Kind. And he is a very intelligent man. I know I'm speaking about him like he's not right here, but I'm going to continue to do so just for a second. He's an incredibly intelligent young man. He's articulate to no end, and I would just once again I'd like to thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. I know everyone in the audience was very excited about this. I must have mentioned the fact that No White Guilt is going to be our guest 2 p.m. Central Time at least a dozen times yesterday. So to say I was excited was a bit of an understatement. But once again, thank you.
No, and thank you. And I'd like to thank, I think, is it pronounced Privada?
Bravada, that's right.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to thank him as well because he has been doing a lot of legwork, reaching out and speaking with me about showing up here today. And so I just want to make sure I recognize him and his hard work as well.
He's extremely hardworking. I think he's a little tired. I know he'll be taking it easy. I hope he's taking it easy today. But he has been so helpful with everything because there's really no guidebook on how you start out on the internet, right? You kind of just have to start trying new things, see what works, see what scheduling works, and how to get guests. And he's just he's words cannot even say the amount of gratitude I have for Pravada. He's exceptional at what he does, and he's very nice. But anyway, so we were talking a little bit. Pardon me. So before we went live, everybody, we Jason and I were just kind of having a little conversation, and in a way, I guess you could say we were reminiscing about a question I asked in a live chat of his, right? Because before I was on this side of the stream, I would always like to, kind of hang around in live chats and try to see the same people, have conversations with them, try to, use the live chat to start a dialogue with the person that I was watching. And Jason had opened up questions for the audience. So of course I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask my question. And I asked him, and this is especially during there was a lot of hype. I mean, I know there is still hype, but there was a lot of hype about the DACA situation, right? About the dreamers. What do we do with them? We can't send them back, right? Because that would be cruel towards them. And so I had asked Jason, okay, well, how should we address, kind of that argument that we can't send them back, right? That would be mean to, say it simply when we are talking about this with especially kind of non-white whites, right? Anti-white whites, that's actually a better way of putting it. And he had a little advice for me. Would you like to kind of tell the audience what you were telling me at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important thing is that we fall for, well, I guess I could even take a step back. We are not practiced as whites who care about white well-being, and whites in general are not practiced at discussing race and racial matters and our well-being. So we come at these conversations with this absolute dearth of training, even if we have some sort of innate ability. It is, we are swimming in this sea of anti-whiteism. So we come with these a dearth of training in how to discuss our well-being, and also we are infected with, it just seems like it's almost countless, we can say without that being hyperbolic, mean pathogens that infect how we think about ourselves and the world. And those mean pathogens undermine who we are and our ability to stand up for our well-being and advance our well-being. So when we end up in conversations with anti-whites, whether they're white or non-white, who are arguing for the well-being of non-white peoples, we are utterly disarmed. And the person coming against us, and not only are we disarmed, but our hands are tied behind our backs, our mouths are taped shut. The anti-whites that are coming up against us in these conversations have had a lifetime of training in how to discuss these things. The anti-whites have intellectuals that work seemingly tirelessly on inventing and improving, creating, constructing dialectics that are easily adopted by even the lowest IQ'd members of society and are able to be employed by them with great success against us in these conversations. And so we find ourselves very often, and I hear this all the time, I've seen it so many times, just obliterated by the anti-whites. They'll typically come at us, in this case specifically, you have a sentimentalized argument. They want to talk about the well-being of the non-white children. And by doing so, the argument is framed on this particular group and pulls at the heartstrings. In this case, as I say, a sentimentalized argument pulls at our heartstrings for innocence suffering. And by doing so, they end up defeating us in this argument when it comes to our well-being and what should be done for us. It implies that we should be focused primarily on these non-white children rather than on our children. It implies that there is no need to concern ourselves with the well-being of white children. And it also frees the anti-white as well as those who are under consideration in this equation, the non-white peoples and their children. It frees them of having to reciprocate to us. If we are going to have concern for them and their children, then by proper standards, they should have to reciprocate concern for us and our children. And there is no reciprocation there because they are freed by these anti-white mechanisms of that. So what I attempted to address with Kayla's question was the position that one should take when in a discussion with an anti-white, white or non-white, on this issue. And that is, what about the white children? Reframe the argument to what is important to us. Our children are no less valuable than theirs. Our children and our culture and our people are no less important than theirs. To us, of course, they would be more important because those are our families. Those are our loved ones. These are strangers. More importantly, they are not considering the damage that they are inflicting on us, the crime that they inflict on us when they inundate our towns and cities, the rape. I mean, let's just, we talk about things like the word crime, and we talk about things like stagnant wages because of a glut of workers and things. All of these things are intangibles when you're talking about them. They're sterile. And so we don't get the real feeling of what's taking place. When these people come here, it is without doubt that crime will go up, that white women are going to be raped, brutally raped, lives ruined. Their loved ones, their lives will be altered forever. People will be murdered. People will be maimed. Our people who would have lived healthy, happy, successful lives will have those lives snuffed out of existence, whether through death or through some sort of crippling incident that so disturbs them and disrupts them psychologically that they can't function. So just to get back to the point here, that when an anti-white brings, and this is another just an ancillary thing I'll say, when an anti-white brings a sentimentalized argument to you, and remember, and I discussed this in Go Free, I discussed the ISM of pretexts. Okay, so that's the intellectualization, sentimentalization, and moralization of pretext that the anti-whites employ to arrive at anti-white conclusions. When they bring a sentimentalized argument to you, what about the children? Do not respond with something intellectual. Do not respond with data. An intellectual argument cannot defeat a sentimentalized argument and attack. You have to respond with sentiments. Focus on our children. How will this change the world for our children? They will be raped. They will be maimed. They will be murdered. They will have their future stolen from them. They will have their environments that were built by their people and intended to be gifted to them, not to the world, not to non-whites. They will have that stolen from them, and they will have it changed in such a way, their environments, that everywhere they go, they are uncomfortable. Everywhere they go, they are seen as the enemy. Everywhere they go, they are seen as the oppressor. They will have every part of their life disrupted and sullied by the presence of these non-white children. You can go into the economic sphere, as a lot of people like to do, because they're fearful of talking about specifically the racial well-being of our people. But you can go into that sphere and you can talk about white children and how their wages will stagnate, how it is legal already, and this will only increase in severity as the number and percentage of non-whites increase, how they will find it harder to get a job. It is already illegal. It is already legal to discriminate on the basis of race when it comes to a white man, and a little less often to a white woman, but certainly to a white man. It is legal to discriminate him. And in our anti-white environment, according to the anti-white narrative, it is advisable, it is desirous, it is celebrated when those acts of discrimination take place, because thereby it increases this magical thing that we're told is so wonderful, which is diversity. So in every aspect and avenue and climate of a white child's life, every single area, he or she is going to be harmed by the presence of these non-white children. So turn the argument back to that, force the anti-white to speak to those issues, force them to defend why it will be a good thing to inflict this harm upon white children. And I guarantee you that you will win that conversation.
And I mean, just even as I just have to say this, that was beautifully said. That was it, fantastic. That's all. I'm just going to stop right there when it comes to that one point. But also, I like that you were pointing out that for a lot of people, a lot of you know, I guess you'd say pro-white advocates, whether they're nationalists or alt-right, whatever it is, right? We have a certain, pardon me, we have a certain way that we're able to, in our own way, operate guilt-free in the world because we have all of the facts, because we have all of the statistics backing us up, right? It kind of lessens any guilt that we would have, because we can say, and we can say this to ourselves and to others that try to put a level of guilt on us, like, how dare you say these things, is that we're able to kind of respond back, or at least know within our heads or our hearts that we're telling the truth, right? That the numbers don't lie. We're not making this up out of bigotry or racism or anything along those lines. But nonetheless, I do think that it is a coping mechanism for people like us, because no matter what, we still are feeling the effects of being indoctrinated, that if you show love for your people, if you want to advocate for them based off even an emotional connection, right, that somehow that is less okay than simply stating the crime rates, right, or the demographic statistics. And this is something that we're seeing ramped up to such a level. I mean, right, our communities are being overwhelmingly flooded with this anti-white narrative. It's something where, you'll have a lot of universities that have this as some type of, I mean, naturally, I want to say mandatory training, because that is, what it is. But right, they have these mandatory courses that you must take, whether it's addressing whiteness or, like superficiality of dominant white culture. They'll have 11 part courses to address all of these things, and yet sometimes it's so much easier and it's so much more true to ourselves to simply say, I love my people. I want my people to benefit. I want my family to benefit, my children to benefit, right? And just because I want that, it doesn't mean that I hate other people. But we have kind of, you know, reached this point where or the two are mutually exclusive, right?
Mhm.
In some way, or sorry, it's a bit of a dichotomy in a, trying to get my words right. I'm going to have another sip of coffee, but you get my point to where if you love, it's just a nice conversation. My goodness. Well, I mean, just as a side note, you speak so beautifully that I think half the reason that people will never sound as articulate as you. One, obviously, it's probably not being well read, so forth and so on. But it's just this like nervous thing. You just hear it and you're like, oh my goodness. And I just want to say that something is just bad or it's stupid or it's me. You come up with these single syllable words. But no, I mean, I think that's where we're seeing this thing to where if you love something, right, then there's the automatic counterpart that you hate the other thing, right? That you cannot simply operate it on one plane, or you can't operate in one field where, no, I just love my people. I want them to do better. I want them to have the best life possible. And if these policies, whether it's immigration, whether it's economic or trade or within the education system, if these things are being put into place, right? And you can make a very strong argument that they are being put into place by very anti-white people, right? I mean, evil people.
Mhm.
Because if you're doing this, I mean, you look at the education system and the way, pardon me, the way that they are teaching, I mean, extremely young children that their ancestors are bad. Pardon me, my goodness. Okay, sorry, I did an 8 hour thing yesterday. I shouldn't have done that, but I apologize.
No worries, no worries.
But no, I mean, so that's the thing, right? We're seeing it, and it's being taught younger and younger of this anti-white. And I mean, I did want to discuss white guilt with you because we'd like to focus to a certain extent on the education system. And obviously, the way that it has changed, there is a difference to some extent. But to the severity that kind of these high levels that this anti-white narrative is being taught, right? And this shaming for these young children for simply being what they cannot control, right? And obviously there is the blatant hypocrisy there of a lot of anti-racists absolutely, destroying the confidence of young boys and girls for their race, something that they cannot control. That's kind of the obvious thing, but when you see this, when you see kind of the destruction of a child's self-worth, right? Kind of these innate things within them in which they are able to kind of reach into themselves, pull out and be proud of, right? When, especially in terms of their ancestors, in their accomplishments, in their familial bonds, in, whether you want to say like, oh, they're, kind of homo narrative familial unit. I mean, these children, are kind of those are in a way they're almost like weights, right? They keep the child balanced, they keep the child centered, and we're seeing these weights that really help children be well adjusted socially speaking, being removed, being mocked, being degraded. It's something that, I mean, I look at these things and I have to say there is no other reason for this than a malicious intent, because obviously they're not just trying to build up non-whites. They feel like they can only build up non-whites by tearing down whites, and they're starting especially with our children.
Hmm. Yeah, you're making a great point there, and I think part of the problem, and this is where I was saying that we live in this ocean of anti-white poison, and we are unable to really understand the world as it genuinely is because of this brainwashing that begins as soon as we are able to receive the information from our environments. Our elders were infected with these anti-white poisons, and they communicate them to us. They are communicated by every means of media. So there isn't a way for us to see around this. What a person has to do, and what I have done, and what helps me is one has to cleanse oneself of these what I refer to as meme pathogens. So, for example, the idea that diversity is a strength is a meme pathogen that we were infected with early in life, and then that is reinforced throughout life. It is given to us as though it has been handed down by a deity, and it is also enforced with punishment if you don't obey. So we are ultimately, whether you believe we have souls or not, we are animals and we respond just like any other animals on planet Earth to reward and punishment, and thereby we are trained. And that's where we are today. So when we say things like loving our people doesn't necessarily mean that we hate someone else. The only reason we say such things is because we have learned, and therefore it's been imprinted into our subconscious mind, which is far more of a dominating force in who and what we are than our conscious thoughts. We have absorbed this notion that to care about white well-being is to want to exterminate non-whites. We have learned that through countless means, by countless sayings and instructions and lessons, as well as it being just blatantly said. But it isn't always just blatantly said, because that is one of the least effective ways for training an animal of our caliber. It's more often delivered obliquely. A great example is anti-whiteism delivered by way of news and entertainment. But I guess before I say that, I want to mention that there doesn't have to be shadowy cabals that are sitting around and saying, okay, how do we undermine white people? Those things can exist, but they don't have to exist for these outcomes to be achieved. For example, you are BigCatKayla, and not, I think that's a mountain lion in your picture there. It's a beautiful animal. But they are usually lone hunters. Let's for a moment, let's talk about lions. They work together, and it's important to note this is how the anti-whites end up working in most cases. I'm not saying that this precludes very powerful, very wealthy anti-whites using their wealth and power to organize entities and to fund movements that inflict harm on us. They absolutely do. I'm just saying that that is not the origin of the anti-whiteism that is inflicted on us. The origin is in the individual. And so as we see with lions, for example, we see the lionesses, they will circle prey, they will start a herd on a run, and they will outflank the prey. These lions have not gotten together ahead of time and said, here's the herd, draw it on the sand. I'll come this way, they'll go that way, you will come from this flank, you'll come from the right, you'll come from the left, we'll have a little pincer action going on. They are just following an objective. They are rather pursuing an objective in a context. That's what's very important to understand. They are all pursuing an objective individually in a context, right? In this case, it's the plains of Africa. And as a consequence, they appear to move in concert. As long as that objective stays the same for these individuals, they will appear to be working almost with a hive mind. And that's what essentially is happening with anti-whites. The question then is, and this is the primary driver, where does anti-whiteism come from? Where does this anti-white desire come from? And it comes from the same place for both white and non-white anti-whites. So in the case of non-whites, they look at the glory of Western civilization, and they compare that to what their people have done. They look at the magnificence of our architecture, our music, our science, our art, our history, our glorious history throughout the eons. And they look at what their people have done. And as a consequence, they feel jealousy and envy. And when the white person becomes anti white, it is the same mechanism. They look at all of those things in Western civilization, and for some reason, they do not see themselves a part of all of that glory. And it can be for a single reason, it can be for several reasons, but it can be something like they perceive themselves, and maybe they are objectively quite ugly. They can perceive themselves, and maybe they are talentless. So there are many things that can cause a white person in society to feel that they are not part of the grand Western civilization, the great glory of the white race. And as a consequence, they feel jealousy and envy. Now, healthy people, like myself and you all listening, when we feel jealousy and envy, we know that it's not healthy, it's not salubrious to indulge those sentiments and allow them to drag us down into anger and resentment. Instead, we either ignore them, which might not be the most effective thing to do, or we allow them to spur us to become better than we are. And we know we have the maturity to realize that everybody is dealt a hand at in life, and you have to play the hand you get. We can't manipulate our DNA yet. We can't make ourselves far more intelligent or far better looking or far healthier. These are all the sorts of things that cause the jealousy and envy. But what we can do is we can look at someone who has done great things and been really successful, and we can and we can feel that, gosh, I wish I was that bright. I wish I was that beautiful, or what have you. But we can take that sentiment or those sentiments, and we can then use them to help drive us forward, to get us into classes that we can study to be more educated, at least if we can't be as intelligent, to get us into working out, to have a better shape if we can't necessarily be as attractive as the person that was born that way. Now, what happens is with anti-white, non-whites, and whites is that they indulge the jealousy and envy. They sink into it, and they end up declaring to themselves that they are victims as a consequence. They are victims in this world from the start because they're not as lovely, they're not as intelligent, they're not as well spoken, or they can't sing beautifully, or what have you. And then they look for someone to blame for it. Now, all of this takes place at a very early age. So they look for someone to blame, but who can be blamed? God can't be blamed. I mean, they can try. I've heard people blame God or the Creator, fate, nature. I've heard people blame these things, but the problem with blaming them is that that's a cul-de-sac. It's a dead end. There's no one that you can avenge yourself on. So they then look for someone whom they can avenge themselves on. And in this case, it is the average white person. It ends up being the average white person that represents to them all of the glories of the West that they cannot have and that they fail to achieve. But they cannot advance their argument. They cannot avenge themselves on the basis of jealousy and envy, because those two things are considered, obviously rightly so, as illegitimate grounds in Western civilization for some sort of righting of wrongs, what have you. So instead, they resort to what I call the ISM of pretexts: intellectualization, sentimentalization, and moralization of this whole enormous range of pretexts. And this is what you were talking about in these college classes. This is the intellectualization of pretexts. They try to come up with all of these convoluted arguments. Occasionally they'll say, well, this is a universal argument, and then in the very next second you'll find that their universal argument is no longer universal when it abuts this other universal argument or principle that they hold, and we end up wrongly calling these anti-whites hypocrites. They're only superficially hypocrites because those are mere pretexts. That's not their real motivator that's driving them. To say all this, this is quite, I mean, really getting into the weeds here with how this mechanism works. And what I like to do is empower our people in their lives when it comes to their friends and family and their neighbors, their enemies, whoever they're speaking with about these things. And here's the easiest way. Here's the most powerful thing I can communicate to you. When an anti-white, now remember, the anti-whites have been at this for a long time. They've been building these moralized arguments, this intellectualized arguments. And you, Kayla, you had shared with me a great article, and we can go into that later if you like, about some anti-white classes that are going on at a university. And when they bring these sorts of arguments to you, the only thing you need to say, don't engage these arguments, first of all. These are mere pretexts. You would not engage a liar on your doorstep who was giving you pretexts. You would say, look, I don't want to hear the nonsense. X is going on, and I know that that's the real motivator, so get off my doorstep. This is how you have to handle an anti-white. Just say to them when they bring these enormously convoluted arguments, say to them, I don't care what argument you can make. If it arrives at an anti-white conclusion, I reject it. And that's it, folks. They have nothing more they can say at that point, because all of the arguments, all of the classes, all of the training, all of the moralization and sentimentalization and the like, all of it is reduced to an anti-white conclusion. And if you simply refuse to accept an anti-white conclusion under any pretext, and you force them into the position of denying that they are anti-white, and you force them into the position of specifically saying, no, we should arrive at an anti-white conclusion because of X, Y, and Z, you have won the debate, and they will walk away or run away, maybe, shaking their heads.
Well, and I think that is something that, because it seems to be, and I like that you said, right, that the best option is to just, I guess you'd say almost just opt out of being reactionary. And in the sense of, they want to have this discussion. It's a discussion based on a premise we shouldn't recognize, for one. And it's incredibly disingenuous. This isn't something that is going to help us, and we're not going to engage in, I mean, to simply put it right, negativity. But at the same time, what I've noticed is that they reacted in turn by making these things mandatory, right? They noticed that people were starting to trend towards simply not engaging in the arguments, not engaging in the classes. Pretty much, you're a ridiculous person. I'm not going to surround myself with you. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to engage you or indulge you. But, I mean, they're able to use, powers within their administrations and so forth to force, whether it's a kid going to a class by making it mandatory for them to graduate. Or in the state of California, they are trying to make it, in some sense, illegal for parents to pull their kids out of sex ed training, which they find or feel to be inappropriate. So they notice that people are now starting to turn their backs and now starting to say, no more, we're not doing this, right? And to simply put it, we're not doing this. And, so they're countering with, okay, well, we're going to make it where we can hold something over your head, right? If you don't want to play the game, we're going to make sure that there is a real consequence for not engaging us. And I think that seems to be, in a way, at a point that we're at. Because like you said, this anti-white, I'm just going to say rhetoric, right? But I mean, really, it's a narrative, but also policies, right? These are real world policies that if you want to disassociate yourself from them, from the people pushing them, right, you have to be willing to remove yourself from the wider world. To a certain extent, right? I mean, you don't want your kids to be taught this in school. You have to make sure that you homeschool them. If you don't want your kids to have a media that is, whether it's based on anti-white, pro-immigration, pro-miscegenation, whatever it is that you find to be unwholesome, right? Or distasteful, whatever it is, and you want to opt out of that. Well, you have to make sure that your children, they don't watch TV. You have to hyper regulate your life and the people that you love around you and what they engage in out of a strong, sense of protection or protectionism that you want to make sure you block them from all of the negative things in the world. But at the same time, when those negative things are so prevalent, and now the fact that they are really trying to make it either, make it extremely detrimental for you to not engage back. I think that's kind of where we're at, right? Because we've seen their infiltration of academia, right? We've seen their infiltration of media. We've seen their ability to, I mean, I call it, when the left or whoever, the anti-whites do this, a form of financial terrorism by calling up your job, making sure you get fired, you get blacklisted, making sure that they, do their best job to have you shunned from greater society. And so, you start to see little communities forming, off to the sides, right? I mean, even this corner of the internet, one of the goals is to form a sense of community, to start talking about types of charities we can have that are pro-white, or start talking about a type of networking system in which if a young man, wants a good job where he can obviously afford to have a wife, to have children, that he will actually get advice that is good for him and possibly get him networked with employers, or get him networked with an apprenticeship, an internship. I mean, kind of starting to create the alternatives. And I'd say, have you seen good alternatives to kind of this situation we're being presented with, where, if we don't start providing things for our own people, right, providing another option, they are definitely going to be put in the place where they either have to play ball with these horrible people, right? Or they're going to have to opt out of playing at all and suffer those consequences as well.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
go
yes,
ahead,
sorry, go
please
ahead.
finish.
Oh no, I was just kind of reiterating, saying, is there anything on top of that that you would recommend, especially for young men? I mean, obviously young women as well. We're working on getting the female audience here, but at least 90%, here today, or even listening in general, right? They're all young men, and without good young men, we can't expect to have good young women within a society, or beautiful young families. So,
Right. Well, you're saying a lot there. I think that when it comes to children and where you put them, or maybe I could even take a step back, to what you were saying earlier, the anti-whites are increasingly forcing us to undergo their anti-white brainwashing, their propagandizing, because they see that we are beginning to reject it. They see that there isn't an argument that they can make increasingly for the average white person that can come to the conclusion, come to an anti-white conclusion that white people will willingly accept, as was the case in the past. Whites could be sufficiently white guilted, and then when they come to the anti-white conclusion, the whites say, "Oh yes, I have been sufficiently white guilted. Let's go forward with that plan." Then now whites are bristling at it because of what's become of our country. It was one thing for a lot of lazy people, a lot of lazy, selfish whites who indulge this individualism, to sit in their homes and go to their jobs. And as long as their particular communities were fine, or as long as they could move another exit down the highway and get further away from the damage being done to the country by anti-whites, they just did not care about their fellow whites and about our nation and this country, the United States, that we built. And the same holds true in other Western countries. So now they can't get away as easily, and the anti-whites are forcing it upon us and those whites that much more vigorously as a consequence. They want to say, you're not going anywhere. You're going to accept these anti-white conclusions, whether you like it or not, sort of an attitude. When
right.
when it comes to, and what can you do in those situations if you're employed somewhere and it is rabidly anti-white? Then obviously there are some questions you have to ask yourself. If you can't speak out against the anti-white policies of the company because you'll be fired, for doing so, and might make it impossible, but certainly difficult, to find commensurate employment somewhere else, at least in the area where you live. So you have to weigh a couple of things. How bad is it for you in that environment? What is your future going to be like in that environment? Are you and being anti-white, pretending to be anti-white is not enough anymore.
Right.
You're not gonna be guaranteed a job anymore just because you're anti-white. Anti-white white people are being replaced by non-whites every single day. So you have to ask yourself, what's my pay like? What are the benefits to my family, this community, all of that sort of thing, and compare that to what is life like at my place of employment. Is it so psychologically unbearable that it outweighs all of the benefits? If so, then search for employment somewhere else before you end up lashing out at your employer. To a degree, you can also find some solace in in those cases by donating your time, talents, and money to the cause of white well-being, because that gives you a feeling like, okay, I'm oppressed at my work. I can't speak out. My boss will fire me. He or she's anti-white, but I'm really getting them back in the end, because every day I go home, I write that check, or I build that website for another pro-white content provider who's on the front line, or what have you. You could do that, or as I say, just find another job, find somewhere to escape it. And when it comes to your children, you have to be very careful, because the anti-white propaganda is intended to absolutely corrupt their thinking from the earliest of years in life. So you have to be there with them. It's not enough to teach them that this is a I don't know, a fairy tale from our past, or this is a custom from our past. So you should be proud of those. We have customs too, just like the Mexicans or the El Salvadorians or something. No, it's far more important to teach them how to see, teach them how to recognize the anti-white attacks on our people. Because by being able to see, and this is what I've done and has changed, I've converted a great many people this way, both face to face and by way of this medium. By teaching them how to see, they then go out into the world and they see it everywhere. And I've argued for this for a very long time, because a very long time, the anti-white, this regime is anti-white. Okay, the regime throughout all Western countries, it's anti-white. They dominate the government, news and entertainment, media, academia, etc., churches now. And as a consequence, they get to our people every single day of their lives. It's coming at our people every single day, their information, their anti-white meme pathogens. So when we have the ear of our people, we have routinely tried to get the message across to them. Sometimes a very complex message. Look at all of these facts. Look at all of this data, etc. And even if they have the time to take a look at that and to understand it, they then are immediately thrust right back into the anti-white venom that surrounds them, the water in which they are encased. So I have always argued that we need to use a form of jujitsu, and I know you're into martial arts, so this will speak to your heart. We need to use, and this is what I have been doing very successfully, using the weight and power of the regime against them. So you do that by teaching people how to see. And in my book, one of the areas that I begin is with commercials. This is how I have begun the discussion with many people face to face. And I can only tell you that it has been miraculous when they come back and they suddenly are beginning to see. Their eyes get as wide as saucers, and they get to that point where I have to tell them, wait, now don't run to your family and start shouting at the top of your lungs that there is this anti-whiteism in the world and it's taking us down, because they won't be able to accept that energy.
Right. Right.
But that's actually a great way too, a great lesson for people who might listen to this, that are in that state. They've just come to see these things and they have that big energy. It's important to when you go to friends and family and the like, to throttle that energy a little bit. They're not going to be able to appreciate it. They're going to be frightened by it. They're going to think something bizarre has happened to you.
Exactly.
You want to teach them, as you were probably taught at some point, without even knowing it, perhaps, that how to see. So you teach them how to see, and in my book Go Free, as I say, one of the first places is with commercials. And once they begin to see that in these commercials, there are teams of people making these decisions about what actors and actresses will be, who will be paired with whom in these commercials, that these are intentional decisions. They're not accidental. Nobody is tossing a coin to arrive at these conclusions. And since it is such a radically high percentage relative to the actual cases of miscegenation in the public, one can only conclude that there is an intent to erase white people by encouraging us to commit race desecration. Once you begin to see this, once they begin to see this, it becomes far easier for them to teach them more things. They become more interested in the data at that point. They're more willing to sit down. And if you think about your own transformation, it didn't start off with a let me read this 200-page report on racial crime statistics and data. It didn't begin there. You might be there now, or you might have gone past that at some point, but it definitely did not begin there. It began with the realization, the epiphanies that come to you. The last thing I'll say on this point is that it's widely known. There's a saying: it's that you can't teach a man anything. He has to learn it for himself. Now that doesn't mean that you can't teach. What it means is that you have to teach in a subtle way, and a subtle way of teaching is not to come with that great energy about our regime, our government, our media. It's all controlled by anti-whites. Let me show you all their anti-white statements. That will repel these people. The best way to teach them is to give them that little instruction to teach them how to see these things, and then when they go and see them for themselves, which they will see it everywhere they go. I have had so many stories shared with me. Once they begin to see that, they will be, quote unquote, learning on their own at that point, and they will happily accept the truth moving forward from that point.
Well, and that's always one of the things and there are a couple things even just right there, which is one, unless someone is, like you said, right, unless someone is ready to learn something, right, and to learn it at the pace in which you are saying it or you are trying to express it, right, you have to be on the same level as someone. It's kind of even think of it like you've been up for hours, and then your boyfriend or girlfriend, they're just waking up, right? They're not going to want to hear really anything you're saying if you're talking at 20 words a second, and you've already had 3 cups of coffee and they've barely got their eyes open, right? You kind of have to be at a similar level so that someone's ears can even be open. And also, if I definitely agree with you, Jason, where we do have to, kind of help someone remove the scales from their eyes. And simply doing that, we naturally notice patterns. And if we walk around throughout our daily lives and, for example, we don't see a lot of black men with white women, but then we go home and we start seeing these commercials where, almost, a very large majority of them are the same pattern of black male, white female, and a romantic relationship or some sort, or a white man being portrayed as weak, as meek, as needing to be kind of told what to do by his woman or an empowered minority. When because people do naturally see patterns, and people, when they are being honest, when their eyes are open, they will actually start to see the disconnect between what the media is telling them reality is and what reality actually is. And so, and I did notice this, because I sometimes feel like family is I mean, you have to be very careful, red pilling family, right? You have to kind of see what they're receptive to at that point in time. You don't want to naturally go in and talk about international cliques or anything like that. Just when you sit down for Thanksgiving dinner, never do that ever, ever. Um, please, that's the one piece of advice, like right now. Um, but at the same time, you kind of probe people, and I've discussed this before, where I feel like when it comes to red pilling people, to talking about about the patterns that are now really noticeable within society, within media, within academia, or to kind of, I mean, when you start talking to people about these things, notice, and pay attention to what they are fearful of, right? Because everybody has fears. And if you're able to offer them, some level of an explanation, not just, well, offering them an explanation for why, things may be different, right? Because change scares people. I mean, a lot of the time we like to just kind of operate in our daily lives, we do our things, and, even if you don't notice disruptions happening in, kind of the natural balance of your personal life or within the community, eventually we're going to, you're going to notice them. And you kind of can start to see what those fears are, what people are afraid of. Maybe the schools aren't so good. Maybe the crime is going up. Maybe there's a lot of traffic. Maybe the demographics of the small community that they're living in, they're changing. Maybe they notice their children's homework is much different than their homework ever was, right? I mean, kind of, there are all these little things. And when you think about it, right, there is normally a red pill that you can associate with that fear, with that change that they're noticing. And we may not be able to offer them kind of this flat out solution, like, hey, I see that you're, afraid of this change that's happened, or, kind of about things moving in this direction. But at the same time, being able to let someone know that they are not alone in their fears, they're not alone noticing these changes. Just even that, while explaining, right, why things are changing, is a huge deal, because right now speech is being so restricted for everyone. And even, I mean, we're noticing, obviously, there is censorship, especially online, on campus, places in the workforce. But a lot of people are just trying to avoid anyone even needing to censor them, and they censor themselves,
Hmm.
right? So, but it doesn't change, right, what they're thinking. They're just simply, maybe afraid to express it. And if someone else, if you are able to kind of let that person know, right? Saying, that, hey, you're not alone, and you're not crazy, right? Because I think a lot of these things that, we are being gaslit in some way, because we are noticing one reality, and yet we're seeing a whole bunch of people either operating within a different reality or a completely different reality being portrayed. And being able to tell someone and kind of explain to them that they are not alone, right? That the things that they're noticing, the fears that they have, those are true, those are reasonable, right? And it's understandable. That's kind of a maybe a good place to start, right? You don't want to exacerbate their fears, and you know, um, kind of, I guess, in a way, really talk about how things are getting worse and it's only going to get worse. And it's like, well, no, I mean, I understand kind of the immigration things may be a problem, and things were a little different before 1965. Well, actually, things were really different. If, I mean, have you noticed things have been changing? And just kind of opening the door for someone to walk through at their own pace is good enough, right? You don't have to drag them through the door with you. You don't have to push them through the door, but just simply open the door and, kind of giving them that nod that it's okay to walk through. It's all right. Because a lot of people do ask on here, how do you red pill someone? How should we go about talking about these things? And I think the commercials is one of the best things, because you can't escape it, right? They have a script that they stick to, and boy, do they absolutely stick to it. it's something where, anytime that you can point out patterns, right? Anytime that you can have 20 examples for, kind of one point you're trying to make, that's what's best, especially when, it's your enemy putting that out. It's your enemy giving your examples for you. Um,
Oh
you
yeah.
use that against them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. One of the one of the primary things that I think we have to do and we can do when converting those around us is to speak from the point of view of us as a people and our well-being. If you do that and you take it for granted, don't apologize for it. Don't say and we should also be considered in our feelings. No, no, no. Just talk from the point of view of our well-being. And initially, the person you're speaking with will, I promise, and in almost all cases, will look at you kind of odd. Like, wait a second, you you're considering our well-being. No one has done that in my life. And most white people, when you speak to them, they're going to have not heard that somebody considering things from the point of view of our well-being. They have been taught that it is immoral to do so. So when you talk about it with confidence and pride, and with the type of ethics and morality that we see manifest in our best people, they will be initially kind of surprised, but then they'll be drawn to that. It's a whole new way of looking at the world. They want to believe that the only way that we can discuss these issues is to discuss them in terms of what is good for, quote unquote, everybody. And by everybody, they mean the non-whites. That's the primary concern. That's what we've been taught should be our primary concern. That is the only moral concern for us. That's what we've been taught our whole lives. So you need to be, it's a difficult thing. It can be a very difficult thing to be this static pole. You mentioned the commercial. I just want to say before I move on from this, that I made a video called, I think it's called Murder on a Commercial. If you haven't seen it, you should.
I don't think
Uh,
I either.
yeah, I recruited a white woman. This was around the holidays. I recruited her to. She watches, by her own admission, a moderate amount of television. So she works and she comes home, watches television. On the weekends, works around the house, that sort of thing, chores, and watches television. And so I asked her to write down the names of the companies that air commercials that pair whites with non-whites. And she thought, okay, that seems like kind of a strange thing. I think I've seen that before. This is kind of her thinking. Uh, and sure, I'll do it. So, in one day, one white woman watching television, moderate amount on one day, I believe it was 28 commercials that she saw, different commercials of whites paired with non-whites.
Oh
That
my.
is that is not an accident. And I think I was able to find like 23 of those commercials online, so I included them in the video. But that is an effort to erase a people that the world has never seen. That is a colossal effort. When you think about how many people are involved in these decisions, there are boards for these advertising agencies. There's not, as I said earlier, there isn't somebody flipping a coin. And this is the kind of thing that you really wake someone up to, and then they're able to see it themselves. So there's not a person flipping a coin. There are tables with people sitting around them talking about what will this commercial look like, what will our actors, what races, where will our actors be, what races will we pair. That those are conscious decisions that these people are making, and then these decisions have to be reviewed by other people in these ad agencies, and then and even independent agencies, or sometimes the companies have the agencies built into their own companies. Nonetheless, they're still departments.
Right,
And
and
then
even one quick thing, right? Their goal is to make money. It's to appeal to, they want to pretty much put you in that commercial. They want to appeal to you. And you would think that, oh, okay, well, they've got to be appealing to a lot of mixed race couples here, but they're willing to take the cut in whatever money they are not making, right? By not appealing to the 99 out of the 100. right? And only appealing to, maybe the one. That's just also something to take into consideration because they are not immediately taking the profitable route.
Well, correct. I mean, for the anti-whites are fanatical, and they obviously, like everyone else, especially their business owners, they want to make a dollar because they have to use that to buy the things they want, pay their bills, and the like. But as a fanatic, just like any kind of fanatic, religious fanatic, they are willing to sacrifice themselves. They are willing to sacrifice income for that dollar. And particularly when you get into corporate entities and you have individuals who are mere employees in that corporate entity, they have a guaranteed paycheck no matter what the company is making as a whole. So their objective can be solely to inflict anti-white ideology on the masses. The fact that these commercials persist demonstrates that the primary shareholders, if they're open companies, or the owners of the companies, if they're private, that they themselves are anti-white because they're not intervening. They're willing to do with a little less as long as the infliction of harm takes place on Western kind and Western civilization. So yeah, those commercials, they pass numerous groups and committees before they are uh, recorded and videoed and then put up for the masses. And the outcome for them, the dollars, the income is relevant, but more relevant, as they are fanatical, is this the infliction of harm on whites. And we see in companies all over the country where you have these anti-whites, they take over the HR department, and then when they do that, and that's primarily a lot of anti-whites, particularly non-white anti-whites, are hired into these departments because it's an easy way to satisfy racial quotas without crippling the company with incompetent people. So they get them into these departments, into the HR department, and then of course the HR department begins hiring more anti-whites, and eventually you end up with this sort of a death spiral in these companies, because then one of the primary concerns becomes anti-white ideology and inflicting that on the population. And then eventually it becomes the primary concern and the company begins to come apart. So, yeah, when it comes back to draw this subject back to the children, if you can homeschool, you must. If you can homeschool, you must. And when you homeschool, or if you cannot homeschool, and your children have to go to a public school or a private school or what have you, you have to teach your white babies how to see the anti-white ideology. Let me just tell you, it is absolutely criminally child abuse to permit white children and to inflict this upon them, the notion that the only good white person is an anti-white white person. That is the blackest of child abuse, because that conveys to the child that he or she does not have a right to exist. For the rest of their lives, they're trying to make up for that. They're trying to be anything other than white. They become anti-white, or they become some other anything. I mean, we even see these people who try to claim that they have a drop of something else in their blood, and therefore they are that race of people, and then they decorate their homes with the regalia, what have you, of that group of people. So this
Once
is the kind of thing.
Cherokee, something along those lines. Well, that's something, and you know, when I heard you say these people are doing harm to whites, right? What immediately went through my head was, I think a lot of people, that aren't aware of this clear anti-white agenda that's going on, they hear that people want to do harm to whites, right? And they think, what are you talking about, right? No whites are just being targeted and killed in the streets, when obviously there are definitely cases of that, but they don't seem to understand I guess you'd say in a way, like the genetic implications of these policies, right? I mean, because once your race is mixed, your race is no longer your race, right? It's something completely different, and your kind of clear or defined genetic lineage is dead, and that does go along with this idea being pushed that all of the races are the same, right? We are interchangeable with each other. And so that's why it doesn't matter if someone else gets your job. It doesn't matter if your daughter decides to have a child with a white man or a black man, or if you simply just one don't care about being white, or you actively work against people that care about being white. I think that's something that there's a nuance that people either don't want to see or they simply don't believe to be true or important.
Well,
And I mean, I was speaking with someone in the chat last night, and he says he checks a box. Like when he was applying for a job, he checked a box that said he was, two or more races, right? That was an option. And I asked him, well, why did you do that? And he said, well, I wanted to make sure that if, since I could, right, I could take the diversity hire slot. And then that would have a better opportunity for another white to get into the job as well. And I mean, I was thinking about that and I thought, well, it's sad. It's beyond sad, right? It's disgusting that someone actually has to do that. But it seems like, but at the same time, I'm thinking, wow, that's actually very nice of you, right? That is something that we have to, even while operating in this system, right? If you're able to opt out, if you're able to work for yourself or work for a company that is pro-white, right? Is okay with, even just okay with you being pro-white, then that's the better of the options, of course. But, I mean, that's in at least some little way being able to use the system in place now against itself.
right.
And, I mean, but at the same, I don't know, I was really torn when I heard that, right? Because, I mean, the implications of that alone, that someone has to discard what they really are or to try to appeal to, this diversity industry that is in full force is something that it seems so alien. And I understand that that is obviously how the world is working now, at least for now, hopefully. But I wanted to get your opinions on that to some extent of people, and it is touching back, to and this isn't even for. I guess it's more along the lines of people appealing to that other part of them, whether it's the 25% or the 1/16th of insert minority race here, for the benefits, but also to try to prevent other people, less qualified people, from being able to benefit from this diversity industry.
Well, I think the first thing first you spoke about. Well, actually, before I wanted to say this, I
I'm
just
a
want to
little
say to
nervous.
everybody. Sorry.
I said I'm a little nervous, to be honest. I apologize.
No, don't be nervous at all. I enjoy speaking with you. I just wanted to say to your chat first that Kayla has a great show here, and if you all would please, I would appreciate it if you would tweet and gab the show right now, and if you could also like the stream. That would be fantastic. It would bring more people to this message, to the message of white well-being, and thereby will wake up more of our people, and our message will become stronger. Now, you were talking, Kayla, about the
About
whites.
yes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll just say this, and then you can jump right back in. Whites who will reject that harm is being inflicted on white people. When it comes to non-whites, who cares?
Right.
They're going to. That's obviously what they're going to say. It'll be the rare non-white. There are non-whites though that will. I have them write to me, who say that they support what I'm doing. They support white well-being. Some of them are in Western countries. Some of them are in non-white countries, and they admire the pluck and the fight, and they don't want to see the white race go into white erasure as a result of this anti-whiteism. But having said that, anti-white whites are going to reject that any harm is being inflicted on Western kind because that undermines their position. So if you are in a discussion with somebody who is clearly an anti-white, then reject them like you would reject a non-white anti-white. Just get away from them. They're lying, and their objective is being served thereby. Now, when it comes to everyone else, we have this, all of the potential prospects that are out there that could come over to white well-being. We have this notion, and it has persisted for a long time. I'm working vigorously to get rid of it, and I enlist everyone to help me with this, that the only way that we are harmed is when we are physically harmed, when we can say, well, look, there was a lynching of this white person, which, by the way, absolutely disgusting. We have these crimes against us that are lynchings that are played down by the anti-white media. They'll say, oh, well, even though it was 10 on 1, they stole the white man's watch, so it was just a robbery. No, that is a racial lynching when non-whites attack us like that. But we have this notion, and it's because it's the most tangible, it's the most visceral, when we are physically attacked, maimed, murdered, what have you, that we resort to this. We resort to, well, let me tell you about the physical ways that we are harmed. And certainly people who are educated and who have learned all of this different data about the different crimes, they can specifically identify crimes. They could come up with a litany of these things. But what is more important, and the way we are truly harmed, is like what I was talking about with white children learning that the only good white person is an anti-white white person. That is an infliction of harm that is incomparable. If you bring this up to a prospective, acolyte, convert to white well-being, if you bring this up to them and you were to ask them, would it be okay to teach non-white children of any non-white race? And I would also encourage, don't specify any particular non-white races, because it puts them in the center of our story. We are at the center of our story, not them, not any particular non-white race. The non-white races are out there in the periphery. They can be neutral or anti-white. We are at the center of the story. But if you say to the white person, if we were to teach a non-white child that the only good member of their kind is the member who objects and opposes their well-being, the white person would say, obviously that would be wrong. That would be hellish. That would be egregious to inflict such a notion on a non-white child. Well, indeed, it is egregious to inflict such a notion on whites, and that is what is inflicted upon us every day. You could bring up something very simple, like slavery. Whites are inflicted and infected with the notion that we are somehow responsible for slavery, when every race on planet Earth has practiced slavery, and there is only one race that put an end to it, and that was the white race. So to teach white children that they and their people, that some 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old little boy or little girl, white little boy, little girl, that they are responsible for slavery, that they are responsible for the breaking up of families that are in bondage, for the whipping of slaves, for all of that horrible mistreatment. That is a child abuse that is ineffable. There aren't words that can go to that can truly speak to the harm that is being inflicted on us. And of course, though, we see this and people know it, and perhaps it's a little bit more personal for most whites. They see in their workplaces that diversity means fewer white people. That when a company starts talking about diversity goals, that it means you're next, white man, you're next, white woman. So these are the ways that we are being harmed, and they are literally endless. I will tell you, we could go down a list and be doing it from now until next week and further. I can tell you from experience, if you come up upon a person that will reject any of these, just get away from them. They are serving, and they are anti-white, and they're serving an anti-white objective. Ask them at that point why they're so anti-white, that they feel the need to inflict harm on Western kind and Western civilization. and watch them squirm, watch them try to give reasons for why it's legitimate to teach white children that the only good white people are anti-white white people. You'll
Right.
win that debate.
There's no shame in putting it back on them. That is absolutely, it's more than okay to do, right? I mean, this is something that we should be asking them. We have every right to ask them, right? Why are you trying to enact policies that are clearly anti-white? Because we do know, and everyone here listening, like you said, we know exactly what diversity means, what multiculturalism means, and especially in the workplace, especially in the education system. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I agree. And what was the other point that you had asked about? I guess the whites who embrace. We see people, and this is particularly evident and manifest in older whites because they had nowhere else to go. It's also evidence that the anti-whiteism was taking place even when these older white, and of course it was, we know it was, but this is evidence for those, maybe those who are really young, that the anti-whiteism was in place in our Western civilization for a very long time. And that is, we see these older people who will claim, especially in America, oh, I have Cherokee in me, or I have X, Y, or Z in me. And it's all of these American Indian tribes that were in the movies, really, the ones that it's easy for people to know who they are. So they suddenly have American Indian blood in them from their past. And this is evidence that they are attempting to escape the evil white identity that the anti-whites have burdened them with. Very often, these people end up discovering, especially with these DNA tests, that in fact they don't have, the children of these older people, they don't have a drop of American Indian blood in them. So clearly, more evidence that these whites were attempting to escape the persona. And this, incidentally, is also the reason why the primary motivator and impetus for why we see whites taking non-white mates. Now, it's still infinitesimally small percentage of our people do so. And I'm not excluding or barring the possibility of people of different races falling in love and that being something that is pure and genuine between those people. But in most cases, when it comes to whites, we find white people, again, who have become viciously anti-white, and they are endeavoring to escape the evil white identity. And what better way to escape? What bigger signal can you give to the world that you are not white, that you don't associate and identify with this evil white race, than to flee from the white race and to take a non-white mate and produce non-white children? That is the primary motivator for that when we see it in society.
Well, and I mean, someone that popped into my mind, which I believe is one of the best examples, is a senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren.
Oh yeah.
Now Miss Warren, she's she's done a few things, right? And I know we have some listeners that are in Europe right now. But one of our senators was claiming to be of, gosh, what was the tribe? Well, she was claiming to be of some Native American heritage. She said that her grandfather, was part of a tribe. He had, quote, high cheekbones. So
Oh, right.
that was one of the ways that they could tell. But also, she filled out her, I believe it was a Harvard teaching position. She was applying for this position, and she checked the box that said Native American, right? And she was given that slot because she was Native American. It's something that has obviously there are two things, right? There are people that genuinely do not want to be associated with whiteness because of all of the negative connotations that have been attached, right? And then also because kind of this non-white in the Western world, the kind of image of a non-white in a first world nation, it's been glorified to such an extent. And then you have the other people, right? And the other people that understand it is a profitable decision. It is very advantageous for them to actually adopt this new identity and to spread that around as far as they can, put it on every application, and sell themselves as this different person, part of a different tribe. And we even, I mean, to some extent, right? Especially here in America, we see people that they'll be the first ones to say, "Well, I'm Irish, I'm Italian, I'm Polish," and you'll see kind of the European ethnicities put before the greater identity of I am white, right? And yes, obviously you're a white of European descent, you're a white of Irish or Italian descent, but you are a white person. It seems that word alone now holds this. I mean, it's associated with such a level of negativity, and it's such a level of either it's mixed with malicious actions of the past, like you were saying with slavery, even though we all know that the way that they are telling that story is simply not true, but also the fact that it is seen as something that if you have pride in the fact that you are white, you're either kind of people try to talk you down by saying, well, you haven't accomplished anything. Your ancestors have accomplished something. Like being part of a lineage, being part of a line connected to great men and great societies that have, substantially made the world a better place doesn't count. Sorry, were you saying something?
No, I moved. I guess the mic picked it up. No, you're absolutely right. In fact, it disgusts me. This is sort of one of the Jordan Peterson, the
Yes.
anti-white losers position. I would love to be able to convince my victimizers that they should not take pride in anything that their ancestors had done. They should start over, and they should not think as a group. They should be individualistic, and they should reject what their ancestors have done. They should not climb onto their ancestors' shoulders to do great things. They should not use that glory and that history and that heritage to do better things than they could have done as an individual. I would love to be able to convince our victimizers of that, and that is exactly what is happening to us. You have these anti-whites making arguments that disarm us and cripple us. Of course, we should take pride in who we are as a people. Of course, it makes us better than we are to know that we are from great lines and that we can get onto those shoulders and that we too can do great things. We are not individuals. This is absolute absurdity that the anti-whites have sold to whites over the past number of decades, and that white people, because of perhaps a little bit of a genetic inclination to individualism based on our survival in the frigid north of Europe, that we have adopted. No one is individually climbing beyond everyone else around them. Everyone is, first of all, you begin with your genetics. If you're a white person who is brilliant, you're not brilliant because you did that. You need to realize you're brilliant because that is the DNA that was handed down to you. You are merely a link, and almost unimportant link in a chain that stretches beyond sight into our past, and if we are successful, will stretch beyond sight into our future. But you begin with that, and then you go out and you use the language that others have created, you use the mathematics that others have created, you use the educational institutions that others have created. No one does anything as an individual. But isn't that a great way to disarm a people, to convince them to not unify, to not find that their, and conclude correctly that their well-being is based and determined on the well-being of their people. When their people are attacked as a group, they are attacked as an individual, that they can only be healthy and safe if their group is healthy and safe. If you can convince them that they can somehow escape the destiny of their people, you have defeated that people before you even raise the first weapon against them. So people like Jordan Peterson are an absolute poison. And I've likened him in the past to rat poison. I understand whether this is true or not, that almost the totality of rat poison, and by the way, he does look like a bit of a rat. I don't care that that's a trivial thing to discuss because of how much of an anti-white poison he is to our people. But I understand that rat poison is primarily composed of a substance that tastes wonderful to a rat and is harmless to a rat. It's just a tiny bit of poison inside those little pellets that the rat will consume. That is what kills the rat in the end. And that's what happens with a person like Jordan Peterson. He is far more dangerous for us than a rabid anti-white who spouts off anti-white ideology in front of a microphone at a university. He is far more dangerous because he comes into us with these notions that appeal to many whites, and he tells us, no, you are not great because you had great ancestors. So you absolutely are great. Those ancestors are in your blood. They are in your biospirit, and they are waiting to come forth. No, you're right. If you reject them, they'll never come forth. The great Da Vinci's inside of you will never come forth. The great Max Planck's inside of you will never come forth if you reject those people. But if you embrace that identity, if you embrace that biospirit, you have the possibility and the potential to become those things, to be that great. That is the reality. The great generals, whatever you admire in our people, we have stories about soldiers on the battlefield in ancient times. You'd have one white soldier take on 15 non-whites, soldiers from a foreign land, and defeat them in combat. We have great healers. We have great thinkers like the world has never known. And all of that, all of those are in you. They are in your DNA. So absolutely, you are great. You are glorious, white man and white woman. You are beautiful things, and you have a glorious destiny if you will embrace it.
I absolutely agree. I don't think anybody could have said that better than you just did. And I hope everyone in the chat heard that. And that will be, we don't do timestamps here, not yet, but that will be the one timestamp. I want everyone to hear and to re-listen to what Jason just said, because that is the most powerful statement I have heard since beginning this channel. That is, I have no words to describe that. And anyone that would like to clip that, please do. And please spread that around to every single person you know. There are so many things to be proud of. And do not let these snake oil salesmen that can offer you 5 good things while sneaking in 5 bad things. And the rat poison was a fantastic analogy. That was spot on, because that is exactly what happens. They appeal to our altruistic, to our individualistic nature. And then at the same time, they use that against us and they exploit that. And that is the most dangerous person for white well-being, because they understand exactly where our weak point is, and they will butter us up with all of this other knowledge that they give us, right? Or these life lessons, but then they will sneak, and I don't think he's trying to be sneaky, right? That is absolutely what he believes. He believes that any collective identity, well, that's the same thing as communism, and communists are bad, and identity politics are bad, but he doesn't take into account who listens to him, who watches him, who goes to his shows. Of course, there will always be outliers, but whites are the people that try to understand the philosophical nature of the world. Whites are the ones that primarily try to engage in self-improvement. His audience is white, and they are predominantly white young men, because white young men are being attacked. Their sense of community, their sense of purpose, their role models, all of those things have been stripped from them. And so if someone that is smart or well-spoken comes in and offers to be that role model, is willing to offer them a sense of community, I don't blame anyone for wanting to be a part of that or for finding that person appealing. But we need to make sure that our young men are not being sucked into something that is just as harmful as if they had been picked up by the academic system in some way. Because and this is something that I think a lot of people, not necessarily on our side, but even people that are close to our side, right, but maybe just confused, or they've been misled, misguided, misdirected, but at the same time they think that, you know right, collectivism is not a community. It is simply just a bunch of mindless, kind of, it's a group of mindless people just kind of coming together based off of arbitrary similarities, right? Things that don't really matter, things that have no impact on the world around them, that maybe just come together based off of an ideology or a political affiliation. And they don't understand that there is the way that the individual benefits, right? The platform that an individual has to be that individual, it's not only formed, but it is secured by a sense of community, right? My home will only stay safe in a safe community. If I am in a group of 10 people, I am safer than if I am a group of one or a group of two. And when I kind of imagine the Jordan Petersons of the world, the Sargon of Akkads of the world, people that say, well, no, identity politics is bad, we need to give it up. And they're kind of speaking on behalf of white people, and I know they try to speak to non-whites and so forth, but really, if only a certain group is listening to you, then don't trick yourself in thinking that others are too. But at the same time, I see, I have this image in my head of where you have kind of this battlefield, right? And on the left, you kind of have these, and this isn't even political left or right, but on the left you have the anti-whites, right? And whether those are non-whites or even they're anti-white whites, right? You have the anti-whites on one side, you have the pro-whites on the other side, and then you've got right in the middle, right in that no man's land, you've got the individualists, just a few of them standing there. There's an army on one side, an army on the other, and they're right there in the middle thinking that this is the best place to be, right? Because, well, I've got my principles, and the last place that you want to be standing in a war zone, it's called the no man's land for a reason. When people start to collectivize, they start to team up, you don't want to be, the principled individual standing right there in the middle with no support, no protection, no security, no resources, no community. It's something that we have to understand. There is something that is, to a basic way of putting it, really, and it's really basic, but there is safety in numbers. And if you are concerned about the demographic change happening, if you are concerned about a genetic replacement happening, then I'm sorry, but right, you need to collectivize with people of your kind. It's not about creating some hostile environment of us and them, but do not expect that when we lose, if we lose this numbers game, that any other group of people will show us the same level of empathy that we have shown them for centuries. It's not going to happen. A lot of people, I think, sometimes really believe, in a greater, if you treat people a certain way, they will treat you a certain way. But the thing is, whites are not being seen as the group that have treated people well. So when we become the minority and we are not being treated well, a South Africa style situation comes in, they will feel fully justified or vindicated, right, in the actions that they commit against us.
Without question. That's actually a great point that you just made, and bears repeating, that we are not seen as the group who has done well or right by others, even though we have done more and given more and done more right by others than any other group on planet Earth by far. At any given moment, this is a reality I like to address and just mention. At any given moment on planet Earth, there are meetings taking place that are staffed by white people, funded by white people, and either 100% or nearly 100% the attendance for the entire group and the meetings themselves, white people. And those groups are working on the well-being of non-whites around the world. So at any given moment, there are probably hundreds of these groups holding meetings, holding discussions in the midst of plans for doing good things for non-whites, also doing good things for animals around the world, also doing good things for the environment around the world. But there isn't a single group of non-whites on planet Earth that are organizing for the benefit of white well-being. Not a single group. And yet, despite that, despite all of the effort that whites invest in the well-being and the good of non-whites around the world, despite that, we are still seen as the bad guys. We're still scapegoated for all of the ills of the world, for all of the shortcomings of non-white peoples, and the like. And the reason why it is this way, and this is what I discovered in junior high school, and this story is in my upcoming book, Born Guilty, that will be released in a few months' time.
Ooh,
What I discovered is that we are that this is a narrative. This is the anti-white narrative, and in the anti-white narrative, we are the bad guys. There is nothing that you can do to change that within that narrative. The only thing we can do is jump off of the pages of this story before the sanguinary conclusion. And rest assured, it will be a sanguinary conclusion, just like has happened in St. Domingo. If you want to know our truth, if you want to know our future, if we do not reclaim our destiny and serve white well-being, just look to the inner cities in the Western countries. Look to St. Domingo, what happened there and how it became Haiti. Look to Rhodesia. Look to our people in South Africa today. That is our destiny if we do not reclaim that destiny from the anti-whites. Now, I can assure you, it's very simple mathematics, and this is something you can also share with prospective converts to white well-being, and that is that when it comes to democracy, which is ultimately a farce, but the way it
right.
functions, as we know, in its application in our world and time, the majorities of a people are all that matter. So the fact that a white person might know a non-white person, a non-white, say mestizo, because we have so many mestizos coming into this country, so many Arabs coming into our countries in Europe. The fact that you might know an Arab or you might know a mestizo that would vote with us, that would vote for the well-being of our people and the countries that we have built, is totally immaterial. And you have to be infinitely obtuse to think that that individual somehow represents a countervailing of the majority of their people. When it comes to democracy, it doesn't matter that 1 or 2 or 10% of their people will vote with us. All that matters is that the majority will vote against us. And once they are a numerical majority in our countries, folks, they are going to vote away everything that is ours. And there will be no law to stop them because it will be legal to do so. They already break the laws to inflict the laws in our lands. They already magnify laws to mean things other than they actually mean in order to inflict harm on us in our civilizations. What do you think they're going to do when they have the vote and thereby control our destiny? There'll be votes for reparations to all non-whites, not just the blacks in this country. Get real. It'll be reparations to all non-whites. It'll be voting away the money. And here's the important thing, what you can possibly earn. Here's the important thing about the money, and this is another thing we have to focus on, is it's not the money that matters to us. It's the things that we buy with the money that matter to us. It's the food that you buy that you put in your belly. It's the medication that you buy that heals you of your ails. It's the clothing that you put on your children's backs, the roof over your head. So when they vote these things away, when they no platform us, when they get you fired from your job, it's not just a matter of the paycheck. It is that they are denying food to you and your family. They are denying a roof over your heads. They're denying you the surgery and the medication that you need with these things. Rest assured, if we do not put an end to this and come together for white well-being as a group, and therefore the well-being of us as individuals, if we do not do this, they are merely going to vote everything away.
That's absolutely right. And that's the thing, right? Even if we just simply say, okay, look, we don't get along on a lot of points, right? There's a lot of factions, that maybe kind of divide us or causes even a level of animosity between the smaller groups that we're a part of. We are still there. There is a much larger war happening right now, right? And there is an extremely unified force coming at us and trying to displace us and to displace the future generations. And that is going to be during the exploitation of us and future generations. And if we are unable to put our smaller differences aside and to actually collectivize and act as the collective that we want to be, right? That's it. It's over. It's done. And I mean, like you said, because democracy, it simply is a numbers game, right? It is the 51% oppressing the 49%, but it is not going to be anything like we have ever seen in the West in terms of how normally it's been 51% of Republicans, kind of oppressing the 49% of Democrats or vice versa. That's not going to be the case. Whites already are contributing, or they are contributors at the what level of 70% into the welfare system. Whites overwhelmingly want smaller government. Whites overwhelmingly want property laws, that really favor private property. They want, their gun, their Second Amendment. We have these certain basic types of things that we all adhere to, especially here in America. Freedom of speech, right? I mean, the Bill of Rights, everything, even if people, for whatever reason, do not understand coming together on a racial and cultural level, they should at least start to understand that the cultural level that we come together on, that's going to completely be overridden. It's not even going to be ignored to some extent, right? It will absolutely someone else's culture. And we're seeing this now in certain parts of America where English is no longer the first, really the primary language that's spoken. We're seeing it where the states are almost at war with the federal government in terms of immigration policies, firearm policies. Private corporations are just trying to flat out ignore our constitutional rights in terms of First Amendment censorship. And when you take note that non-whites living in America overwhelmingly vote for policies and politicians that are antithetical to Western culture, right? That that alone, if for whatever reason people feel uncomfortable with the racial aspect of things, in which that is, we can't allow people to feel that way, right? We can't allow people to feel guilty or simply think that, you can ignore these things and they won't make a difference in our lives. Or we can't allow people to feel comfortable thinking that, well, I don't care how things will be. I'm going to be dead anyway, right? When I'm gone, it's over. It doesn't matter. Even if they have children, I've heard people speak like that. And I've seen people obviously think like that. And the whole nihilism that has really plagued our our nations is something that that's absolutely, it has to be one of the hardest things to try to, at least in my case, wrap my head around and try to counter. But at the same time, right, we, like Jason was saying, things are going to change in a way that we have never seen within nations of our status, right? Of our caliber. And these are things that we are going to have to try to get through to people and try to express to people and to try to give them examples like Rhodesia, examples like Haiti. You know, the example right now in South Africa. You look at South Africa and what it was, right? And what it was built up to be during apartheid, right? That was, you know, roughly speaking, that was the jungle turned into a first world nation. And there is not 1 ounce of appreciation for the white minority and the way that they worked so hard and toiled to make that territory thrive. And now there is a systematic oppression and this systematic killing along, I mean, with full government approval. And they even sing songs about it, right? I mean, this is not simply the government saying, well, we kind of don't know what's happening. No, I'm sorry, but if they're singing songs about kill the farm or shoot the boar, you know, I mean, that just kind of, it goes to show that no matter how well we try to build up these societies and say, but look it, we wanted you to have a nice life here too. No matter what, that's not going to matter because there are things that drive non-whites. There is that sense of us and them, right? With them, there really is. And they are unifying, all of them are unifying together, and they are coming at us as a unified force. And if we stand independent from each other, thinking that we will be able to stop it or we will be able to rectify the situation as it's happening, it's, it's never going to happen. And we have to come together and we have to try to figure out what can we do to facilitate us coming together, right? What can we do to get us to come together? What can we do to help one another in terms of real world solutions, right? That, you know, what can we do to start fighting the policies that are happening in schools? What can we do to help providing each other with networking or jobs or you know what I mean? Like certain things that smaller communities have been able to benefit from, and now we're this atomized, you know, consumerist type of identity that has been placed on us. And I don't know. I mean, that's I just for whatever reason, right? I keep going back to that, but I'm trying not to get too far off topic. I apologize. I sometimes, I mean, the show is called a comfy tangent for a reason. The tangent part being a big should be in big red letters. But let me see. Okay, so I wanted to, you know, how do you how do you think we've dealt with these constant threats from outsiders in the past? Is
Well, we
that
were.
something? What's that?
I was just gonna say we were much more unified as a people in the past. Now, granted, we were divided on our differences because, and then that makes perfect sense because we were great, each of our Western countries in its own right, in their own rights, and we had these divisions of these little bit of a different hue of one there and a little bit of a different hue there, different hats over here and different hats over there, and we took pride. We were not infected with this notion that we were not a people and that we didn't deserve to live and that the only good member of our group is an anti whatever member of our group opposing ourselves, opposing our right to existence. And as a consequence, we were able to unite on our as whether we like it or not. I mean, and this is where we have to go moving forward, that our identity as a people begins with who we are biospiritually, and that is we are members of Western kind. I use the word white in an ancillary way to Western kind, but I coined that term for the specific reason that the word white for most people doesn't indicate a race. It indicates a color of a people. We are we are a people. We are a community. We are the creators of Western civilization. We create Western civilization because Western civilization is in us. We create America because America is in us. We create Germany because it is in us. We create France because it is in us. And unfortunately, though, that's kind of a deep topic, and
Yeah, I mean, I understand it's we've been going for almost 2 hours. I do have one question though.
no, please, and
Um,
I'm okay to go a little over too, whatever you are good with.
oh, okay. Yeah, I'm here all day. This is my new full-time job. So, what a job, right? I mean, I'm so lucky. But I wanted to ask you because and this is something that I don't know. I'm sure you maybe have caught a glimpse of it. A lot of people they like to say, and I completely understand why, that if we were to have an ethno state, right? And I'm just using the term; it's a broad term, right? But umbrella, you get it. They would like you, Jason, to be the president, the supreme leader, the emperor of this new territory. And so I wanted to ask you, what would be the I guess, right, the first policy, the main policy that you would want implemented if you were the supreme emperor?
Well, I guess I can kind of answer that question by speaking to the previous issue, which is that we can defend ourselves with as much vigor as we did as individual Western countries. We can do this collectively by introducing and being the glorious manifestation of a united Western kind around the globe, a great white ring that unites all of our people, a desire that is not intended in any way, shape, or form to diminish the the idiosyncrasies of particular peoples. In fact, it is a desire that would long to preserve those idiosyncrasies as unique manifestations of our biospirit, something glorious, something to be embraced. So we need to spread the message of white unity, of maybe global Europa, if you will, of Western kind coming together as a single people and in a way that preserves our differences and in a way that enables us to say, no, there's something deep here within us, and it is glorious, it is magical, and it is as yet beyond science to be able to identify and codify and speak to. But it is nonetheless present, and we see it in everything we do, in our manifestations, in our creations, and we are going to preserve it no matter what. No matter what argument is brought against us by the anti-whites, no matter what position, no matter what imagery of crying non-white children or whatever they bring, we are going to preserve this, and there is nothing on planet Earth that will stop us from carrying that message and that well-being around the globe. That is what I would work for if there were such an ethno state and I would put in charge of it. The thing is that, and we were discussing this a little bit with my colleague Jared of the Great Order and Carolyn Emmerich the other night on our show, The After Party, which was an after hours edition. We were
I
discussing.
suggest everyone go watch it, by the way.
Yes.
Not right now, right? But
Right. Don't watch
after,
it yet. Watch it when we're done. But
the after party to this.
it is. I can assure you that if we can establish a country, if you will, that is focuses on white well-being, it will reflect the our biospirits that are within us, and that reflection will be a music to all whites around the world. They will all be drawn to it, and it will become an impossible tide for the anti-whites. They will not be able to resist it. That is the sort of thing that we need to move toward. And since something like an ethno-state is still sort of an intellectual exercise, we can do that in different ways. We can do that in our virtual communities online. We can do it in real life interaction in small communities in our towns. We can exhibit that glorious destiny that we want for our people, and we can advocate and fight for white well-being without shame and with love in our hearts, with love for our people. And we can do it in such a way that it doesn't matter that the anti-whites claim it to be something other than it is. If you are a ship on ramming speed, it doesn't matter what the anti-whites do and say. You're not bothered. You're not concerned with that triviality of their definition of who you are. You don't answer to their claims because understand they are the enemy. The anti-whites in media are the enemy. The anti-whites in government are the enemy. You do not need their validation or approval for our views. We do not need them to say that it is okay to move forward with who and what we are in our work for white well-being. We and our opinions, that is all that matters. We are creating a new story. I said it the other night, or the other day, I guess, on this week on the alt-right, that I don't see myself, I am not, I'll just say, I am not a Gentile. I'm obviously not Jewish, but I'm not a Gentile. And the reason I'm not a Gentile is because I do not see the world from the Jewish point of view. I do not put the Jews in the center of my story and put myself in the periphery. No, they are in the periphery. We are at the center of our story. Our love, our glory, our destiny, that's what matters. Everything else is out there orbiting. And if it's neutral, so be it. If it's harmful, then we will address it.
No, that's absolutely. I'm glad to hear you word word it like that, if that makes sense. But I think a big thing, and I've really noticed this, and which is a lot of people, and I don't know if it is this feminization of societies, right? Especially right of the Western societies of Europe, of Canada, of America, Australia, where it's almost become it almost has become this unspeakable thing to either think of the world or talk as the world is not a nice place all the time. It's to put it, frank, or just to be frank about it, right? That the world is a mean place, that it is a dog eat dog world, that you can't always be nice, you can't always. I mean, it seems like all the time, everything is being talked about as if it is a human rights violation, which is obviously kind of manipulating the conversation into whether things are a human right or not. And everything is being kind of touted out as this, it's just a human right, right? If a Middle Eastern or a sub-Saharan man wants to go and enter Sweden with no papers or no real reason, right? Well, if you don't allow them in, you're violating their human rights to just enter into your country. And that's just, a weird example I just thought of, but it's something that we are really seeing. And I mean, I think that's one of the things. How do we get people to start? And this goes right back to what we were discussing earlier, where it's the way that people would like to see the world, and then the way that the world really is. People would like to see it as a very nice, very peaceful. Everybody is holding hands and looking out for everyone else, and the way that the world really is, right? It's a harsh place. It is not always a nice place. You can try your best to look out for others, but you can only do that after you have properly looked out for yourself and your own. I mean, are you kind of noticing this? And maybe it's just me that's kind of noticing this really strong force in that direction. But we are starting to see. I don't know when it maybe came about so publicly, right, globally, with this the feminism movement of these politicians becoming feminists and wanting to always take care of the other countries. But kind of, have you noticed this feminization, pardon me, and this world must always be nice, everything is a human right, we must respect everyone's human rights, so forth and so on?
Of course, yeah. Goes right to the ISM of pretexts that we were discussing earlier. This is just another pretext to arrive at an anti-white conclusion, and that's why I endorse and advocate and educate our people to just say, if you can't, these subjects can be very convoluted and complex, and it can be difficult not only to arm yourself on a single one of these subjects, but to arm yourself on numerous of these topics, and thereby able to address each point that an anti-white might make. The important thing is, even if you can arm yourself with all of the data on a particular issue, say like this issue of human rights, and you're able to take this fight to the anti-white, they're not going to let you win. These are dishonorable people. They're not going to say, well, you've bested me in this debate. What they'll do is they'll just change the context or change move the goalpost and they'll revision the field on which the conversation is taking place, and they'll just evade the arguments that you have made. That is typical of an anti-white. In the past, I have, in the distant past, I did what pretty much everybody does. I armed myself with all of the data, all of the information, and when I had these conversations, I would I would go down these enormous rabbit trails with data and logic, and the anti-whites would absolutely, they are as greasy, as homogeneous as people can be. They are absolute, oh gosh, just disreputable. They are not, they're intellectually dishonest. They are not going to cede any ground. And the reason why is that the objective is not being spoken to. When they're talking about, well, when this Arab has a human right to be in your country. If you go down the trail of human rights, what they're doing, what the anti-white is doing, is appealing to the white sense of objective principles that hover somewhere beyond us. Now, the white race is the only race that has done this. We are the only race that has envisioned ideas. I think maybe some of the Asians have to a much smaller extent. A couple of ancient Arab writers as well to a much smaller extent. But the white race has set up these principles that are far beyond, vastly beyond people. We don't think that it applies to a specific group, and therefore we are able to be manipulated by these ideas. And what I say is, no more sacrificing white children, no more sacrificing the white race on the altar of an idea. Now that doesn't mean that we need to get rid of our ideas or get rid of our values, but it is to say that we are enshrining a new value that trumps these, and that is that if it is deleterious to the well-being of our people, then the point is thrown to the trash. It is discarded. We cannot. I mean, this is like a woman selecting a man for a mate. I mean, when she has a set of values and principles, and she will select a man for a mate, and that makes sense, and that's love, and that's harmonious. But if applying these values, irrespective of our well-being, to the world, to all non-whites in the world, is no different than a woman spreading her legs for everyone. These things, these values, these principles that we created were written and adopted by our people because these ideas, these principles, these values made our lives and our communities better for us. And we applied them across the lines of our countries throughout Europe because we saw those people, even though they were citizens of different countries or citizens of different or vassals of different kingdoms, we saw them as nonetheless our brothers and sisters in biospirit. There was something that was instinctual there inside of us. These ideas were never meant to apply to groups of people outside our racial family. And the obvious way to identify and realize this, to acknowledge it, is that in none of these cases did people who came up with these notions, virtues, and the like, and talk about human rights and the like, at no point did they say that this specifically applies to non-whites outside of our communities. At no point did they say that. Furthermore, logic dictates that the assembling or the construction of these ideas, the people who were responsible for them, would have known that extending these notions to the vastness of the non-white world, which is enormous relative to the white world, would ensure the demise of the individuals who created those ideas and therefore those ideas. So when you are confronted with someone who says, here are the reasons, whether it is he has a human right or what have you, you need only to say, I'm not going to accept any conclusion that arrives, or anything that arrives at an anti-white conclusion. I just utterly reject whatever that is. So let's start the conversation again. Bringing this guy into the country, or it's never just one person, of course. It is hordes of them.
Exactly.
Bringing them into the country is going to increase the rape, is going to increase the murders. It is because that is what happens in these people's countries. That is what they manifest. But more importantly, much more importantly, even if they committed less crime than we do, much more importantly is that they will change the tapestry of our civilizations. And that is something that we do not want to happen. That once the tapestry changes, we feel uncomfortable. When the non-whites say, and the anti-whites, both white and non-white, when they say that, well, this non-white group or that non-white group isn't doing very well in your community, and this is one of the pretexts they bring against us. They aren't doing very well because they don't feel comfortable, and so you need to bend over backwards. You need to give
Right.
up more. You need to do X, Y, and Z to make them feel comfort. The reality is they will never feel comfortable. That is a truth. They don't feel comfortable, and they never will, because society as yet doesn't reflect their biospirits. If you want to feel as a white person uncomfortable, go into a non-white environment, and you will see what your future will be like, and your level of comfort. If we do not put a halt to this now, it is very uncomfortable. You are never more white than you will feel when you are in a room full of non-whites. So
Absolutely.
yeah, this is the reality of biospirit. And the bottom line is that at some point, when you have people who achieve, and I guess it's relevant here to another concept I talk about in my book, Go Free, is that when you have non-white groups who are in what I call a numerically diffident position in your civilization, they are not a problem. Just as if there were 100 of us in China, we would conceal our genuine nature. If we were in a little couple of blocks, a few hundred, maybe 1,000 of us, we would conceal our Western ways. We would conceal what feels normal and natural and healthy to us, and we would just mimic the Chinese ways as best we can. That's what happens when a group is in numerical diffidence. However, when a group achieves what I refer to as numerical courage, they begin to express their biospirits. They project because this is natural. They project their biospirits onto their environments because they want to see that biospirit reflected back at them so that they can enjoy the harmony that is a result of that reflection. Once you have more than one group in a state of numerical courage, you then have a cultural arms race, and that inevitably leads to violent conflict. We have seen it throughout time, and we will continue to see it because this is the human animal. This is the human species. It is the biospiritual result of our existence. And if you want a different outcome, you're going to need a different species.
Absolutely. And well, that's the thing, right? So when when whites go to another country, right? I mean, we love to put on the garb, to eat the food, to try to learn the language, to try to walk around, in places that are outside of that kind of hotel safe zone that you normally see. And obviously, if it's a really really crime ridden unsafe place, I get it, but you know what I mean, right? We like to completely immerse ourselves in that culture that we are visiting, right? We are extremely, and I know that we're always seen as these colonizers, as these conquerors, but when we go to other countries, right, especially nowadays, the last thing we do is we try to dress them up like Americans, or just like Westerners. We put a ball cap on, say, and make sure that they only speak to us in English. We really like to experience these other cultures because they are different, and yet, I mean, that's fine, and it's expected of us as well, right? And if we go to another country, well, expect to operate, as obviously the closest thing that you can be for that time as a fellow countryman, you'd say. But when people come over here, right, and we start, kind of insisting. I mean, I wish actually we were insistent, where we kind of politely or meekly ask, hey, if you're working or living in America for 20 years, can you please learn English? It's really hard to talk to you. No, I mean, we don't have that right. Everyone wants to say this is an assimilation problem, but no one is willing to admit that these people, one, they don't need to now, because like you said, they have the numbers to support them, right? They have a completely separate community within a community built. And, we even see with a lot of, like, especially in Britain being an example, with Middle Eastern people coming in, that they have a whole parallel system, right? It's not simply just a little community within, like a little ghetto, a little, kind of Chinatown type of thing within a greater community. They have a completely parallel system, completely, parallel legal system. I mean, the Sharia courts, the marriages, the medical, I don't even like calling them medical procedures, but religious procedures and so forth. And that's just seen as, well, they're not quite assimilating, right? That's okay. We've seen this kind of this trend where we're always, if you have 100 people, right, we're always saying that it's best for a society, it's the most appropriate thing to sacrifice the 99 to appease the one. And no society has ever really thrived trying to appeal to the minority of its community makeup. Um, and so, I mean, it's kind of, and there's so many, kind of things going through my head where another thing that we are seeing is this desire for white women to want to play mother to the people, the nations all around the world, right? Outside of their own, they want to play mother, caretaker, parent, like they, and a lot of people kind of have the theory that our women here that are not having children of their own still have that maternal desire to care, right? It goes beyond, women naturally wanting to be maternal towards a weaker or more downtrodden. Obviously, that's a big thing, but almost this kind of aspect that, well, if they don't have their own babies, they will get someone else somewhere else to fill that role. And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, just kind of shooting ideas, seeing kind of what sticks. But I mean, that's the thing. I mean, yeah, unless we do collectivize, right, and like you said, right, unless we actually unify, we are seen, and it's funny because it's the complete opposite of what a democratic system is supposed to be, right? Appeasing the one out of the 100, right? Making sure that the majority must succumb to the whims of the minority. But I mean, so that seems to be something. We've had some questions in the chat, but I'd I'm seeing how I would kind of reword. One was discussing censorship, and a few were discussing other things. But there's always a kind of theme sometimes of I mean, when someone doesn't necessarily outright or explicitly mention an international clique, people are very interested in asking about that international clique of rootless cosmopolitans. We're gonna have to get Mark Collette on here because he's that's your guy. You don't want to ask why, like you said, you guys don't want to ask Jason about, because that's not where his mind's at, and that's where I agree with him, right? Your mind needs to be on whites first. The non-whites, even if they're causing a lot of these problems, we have to start, you can recognize the problem, but at the same time, right, we have to start recognizing the solutions. And so you mentioned earlier that you're writing another book and that it should be out soon. Would you like to, kind of tell people listening about that book? I mean, I don't want you to give too much away, right? But maybe just a little synopsis.
I will happily do that. And I will also just say that any group of individuals, whether they are Jews or what have you, nationally or internationally, obviously evidence of conspiracy, and I guess I wouldn't call it a conspiracy in the true dictionary definition of the term, really networking. That's what it is.
Right.
The evidence is overwhelming. What matters for me is that they are anti-white. That is what is of primary importance, because that keeps with the theme that we are in the center of our story and those who would inflict harm on us are in the periphery. So that is what, for me, is most relevant. If they were beamed away or left planet Earth tomorrow and traveled to another world, but they were still anti-whites, we would still have a problem. And that's who I would be directing the attention at. So the issue is anti-whites, and us at the center of that story, and the love of us and our people, and the genuine and righteous anger for those who would inflict harm on us of any group out there in the world.
I know we've actually gone on much longer than we originally intended. And I mean, I would like to sincerely thank you for coming on, Jason. I really appreciate it. But are there any other final words that you would like to say for the audience before you do go?
Sure. I have. This has been a great joy to come on to your show. I think that you are going to continue doing great things. It's an exciting and fun and laid back format that I think people will be drawn to moving forward. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate what you're doing for white well-being, and I thank you for that. I appreciate Pravada for helping you out there. And I think that now is the time for us as a people to be excited. Now is the time for us to be inspired. We are doing great things. Our numbers are growing. The anti-whites are, yes, there's a shunting. They're doing everything they can to no platform us. And that is evidence that we are making great gains. I've been around in the movement for a very long time, and I've seen the swells come and go. I predicted this one, and I predicted and still hold fast to the prediction that it will continue to grow as we continue to be able to communicate peer to peer across these platforms, not just getting our information and content that we produce for white well-being out there, but also able to discuss what's happening in our communities, able to discuss with each other from community to community, state to state, country to country, that wherever we are, what is happening in our little part of the world is not the exception, and that what we see on TV as far as the behavior of non-whites and what's happening is the rule. The reality is that by way of these communications, by way of these continuing conversations, we are learning that, in fact, we are not alone, that there are other many millions of us out there that are sick and tired, that are fed up with this anti-white invasion by non-whites, what these anti-whites are doing in our countries, and what they have planned for us in our countries. That we are not alone. That is a strength that is deeper and wider than we can put words to. And we can see indeed that the lies that are propagated by the anti-whites are indeed lies by way of that communication with our peers. And so I predict that good things will continue to happen. I also predict that the anti-whites will continue to try to tamp things down. They will continue to try to throttle us. We will continue to see content producers come and go. We will continue to see people who are doxxed and they will disappear. Folks, this is a real fight. This is not a plaything. This is real spy versus spy. There are things we are doing now in the background, efforts that we are making, things we are experimenting with, and we are getting stronger every single day. And the harder the anti-whites push, the stronger we get. So I don't want you to feel down. I don't want you to feel scared. I don't want you to feel that all hope is lost. It will definitely get darker before the dawn. But know that the darker it gets, the closer we are to that sunrise, the closer we are to the ending of that eclipse, the diamond ring effect on the far side of the eclipse. That is when you will know that we are truly about to rise, and white well-being will spread over this planet like a bloom of white roses. There'll be nothing that can stop us. So I want everybody to feel excited and proud, and I want you all to participate, to get involved, and to know that today and yesterday might belong to the anti-whites, but tomorrow belongs to us.